A clue to why Taiwanese businesses get bigger and ours go bust.
Well, before I start a new business, the main thing is just to be sure what the return on investment would be.
Some sums are done. A 50% annual profit is envisaged. A deal is struck. Frank's in. Although it's a business far removed from tennis racket manufacture, it involves friends. In Taiwan, that's called guanxi, and it's the glue of many such deals. Guanxi operates and works very well wherever Chinese do business. It is an important factor in the success of the mini-dragon countries. Another factor in the unique success of Taiwan is also illustrated here, the influence of Japan. This deal is being celebrated in true Japanese style, with many rounds of strong spirits and an obligatory round of karaoke. In one of the city's other top restaurants, a more senior group of entrepreneurs are meeting. They have in common enormous wealth, but they share more than business success. All were prisoners on Green Island. At this reunion, Mr. Tsai and his friends speak in Japanese, the language of their schooling, and they speak of the terrible times they lived through when the KMT came to Taiwan.
I joined a reading circle during high school. After graduation, former members of the group were interned one after the other. I still don't know what crime I had committed.
Even in the dead of winter, we just wore underwear. Prisoners had to alternate sleeping and standing. In that condition, even pigs would die.
After living through Green Island, nothing else was as difficult as that experience in my life.
I agree. Life in prison was terrible. But it gave us the strength and the will to succeed.
It's election eve, and returning home from the restaurant, Mr. Tsai looks out with disdain on the festivities. It's hours before the polls open, but the KMT is already celebrating. The government wants the poll to show the world that it's loved and wanted. So on election eve, it buys that affection with money coupons. People can redeem them for real money if the KMT candidate in their electorate wins. Of the 101 seats being contested, the KMT wins 80. People like Hu Yin Mong. She's angry at the KMT's election tactics. But when she lunched with old family friend, Mr. Liang, all she gets is a politician's response.
All the problems today have to do with the inequities and injustices of the past 40 years. What we can't deny is that ever since we came to Taiwan, we mainlanders have always had superiority over the native Taiwanese.
We always like to look at issues from both a historic and global perspective. Unlike the Taiwanese who only think of their local interests. I'm not complaining, because the Taiwanese have control over the business world. We don't. So in this way, the situation balances out.
But in Taiwan today, neither the government nor business worry about air, water, land, or our human values. The only thing they care about is economic development. Even if they do recognize the importance of protecting the environment, they still put their priority on economics.
Well, there is no perfect government on earth, But the Kuomintang has certainly led Taiwan from a backward poor nation to the economic prosperity and political stability that we enjoy today.
When Hu Yingmong voices concern about the environment, it's this place she has in mind, Kaohsiung, Taiwan's largest port. It's from here Taiwanese products are shipped to the world. Around this port are the factories of the multinationals. They were attracted to Taiwan in the 60s by tax breaks, political stability, cheap labour, and a total lack of pollution control regulations. This is the result. Surrounding rice paddies have been so fouled by factory emissions, they've been turned into stinking, lifeless swamps. Farmers here can no longer eat or sell their rice. When people were poor, they saw pollution as an acceptable byproduct of development. Now they're well off. They're asking, do the two necessarily have to go hand in hand? Hu Yingmong has become their spokesperson. She travels the country, helping set up anti-pollution groups and haranguing the industrialists she holds responsible. The protest today is small, but Hu is not discouraged. Tokyo, and inside one of the glass towers, centre stage, is the man who for years graced centre court at Wimbledon. Bjorn Borg has put his name to Frank's new racket.
And I'm very happy to be back here in Japan, because I think we have a lot of explanation.
The reason Frank's not wildly happy is that the Japanese boss still hasn't given the go-ahead for a production run. Borg is satisfied, but not the boss. It's the old problem with the look of the shaft, what the Japanese call the transparency.
The transparency. Difficult. Very difficult. Not so easy, ne? Yeah.
Bjorn Borg is as ice-cool as ever. The Japanese exec is working on it. For Frank, it's back to the drawing board. The nightly news in Taipei and the election aftermath brings more protests. The poll has been such a sham, the apathy of the past has turned to anarchy. And the protests are having an effect. After 42 years, the KMT's draconian state of emergency laws have been rescinded. And also, as a result of heightened protests, finally the lifetime politicians will have to contest their seats at the next elections. For old agitators like Mr. Tsai, the pace of reform is bewildering. He welcomes it, but worries. Frank Yu is worried too. The problem with his racket has been solved. A big order placed. Now he has to find the workers to fill it.
These leaflets for recruiting employees were just reprinted. The average salary in our company already exceeds 20,000 yuan a month. Even so, recruiting new workers has not been successful. Even with newspaper ads, the responses are low. How can we expand with this unending shortage of labor?
For Frank, labor costs are everything. That $1,000 a month he pays his employees is as much as his business can stand. He and his executives are thinking the unthinkable, thinking of fraternizing with the enemy.
I think we should transfer our factory to mainland China. Training and communication is very important, and the language of the local employees will be a crucial factor.
The transport system is well organized within China's special economic zones. Also, overall instruction, training, and technology transfer can be achieved smoothly. For these reasons, I think we should consider mainland China as a strong possibility for our future expansion.
But the risk is great. The KMT-controlled government on Taiwan still discourages firms like Frank's from setting up in China. The dilemma Frank finds himself in is shared by thousands of Taiwanese entrepreneurs. Once his factory was simply a source of cheap labor for overseas firms to have their tennis rackets made to specification. Now, Frank himself is doing the designing. It's happening throughout Taiwan and throughout the mini dragons. Businesses based on cheap labor becoming expert, and their workers more skilled. It's a time for workers and management to make some tough decisions.
What I see all around me is too many people who become crazy about money and speculating in the stock market. Many Taiwanese have forgotten our traditions and national sense of purpose. We are hard-working people. Personally, I'm very worried about this. As you know, there is a tendency for the sporting goods business to ship its factories overseas because the cost of labor is so high in Taiwan. Many companies have already moved to Thailand and the Philippines. We ourselves will visit mainland China to research possible sites for factories in the future. But in Taiwan, if we can only work together and try harder, I believe there is still a way to survive. We're just in a period of transition.
Just a period of transition. Tell that to Mr. Liang. The first session of the new parliament is approaching, and Mr. Liang is lobbying to be elected chairman or speaker of the House. His stature and seniority make him almost an automatic choice among the KMT old guard. With troops outside the parliament, the government clearly expects opposition DPP protests. There's even been talk of a DPP challenge to Mr. Liang.
You should give the opposition a chance to speak out.
But if we let them debate, it will take too much time. Today's session is only to discuss procedural issues, so we should not spend time on anything else.
Mr. Liang's strategy gives a pretty fair illustration of his views on democracy and what sort of speaker he'll be. Mr. Liang lays down the law, as he and his cronies have done for years. Only this time, no one listens. An opposition in Parliament is a novelty for Taiwan. Political debate is a novelty for Taiwan. Mr. Liang is finally realizing that he's presiding over the disintegration of KMT power. "40 years ago, young students in Taiwan stood up for democracy and for independence. They were crushed ruthlessly. Their hopes for freedom suppressed all these years. Now, once again, students are raising their voices, making the same demands as Mr. Tsai and his generation did on February the 28th, 1947, the 2.28 incident.
I thought the Taiwanese had lost the courage to fight after a long history of oppression and an authoritarian regime. The students' courageous acts came as a big surprise to me after all those years of government control.